Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Dan Lawrence. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Writing, Language, and Literature at the University of Wisconsin Superior. And this is Writing 411, Writing and Artificial Intelligence. I'm really excited to teach this course. It's a course of my own design, and it's new and it's interesting, and I'm happy to have you here. So in this video, I'll just talk a little bit about myself in case you haven't had a course with me before, and my particular interest in technology and writing and AI, artificial intelligence, and then give you an overview of some of the things we'll be doing, and also, quite a bit of like context and couching. Um, Maybe that's even a good place to start here is just to, I really clearly, I've given a handful of public presentations about AI too, and there's always this kind of misperception that I'm advocating for people to use AI, and I think I really clearly want to off the bat say that that's not the case at all. I've have a deep background in the philosophy of technology and the critique of technology. So by having a class on AI, I don't want you to make the like implicit assumption that I'm saying, yeah, go ahead and just write everything with AI tools. And no, we're going to be critiquing them and experimenting with them. And so it's almost like we're coming at this from like an objective academic. We're studying how are people using these tools, what are their advantages and disadvantages. What are people actually doing with them? What are their, they hallucinate. That's the terminology we use. They fabricate information. There's like, are there dangers for disinformation? Those are all quite, there are environmental impacts, the amount of energy consumption that's being used by all this computational power. Those are all really valid questions. And so it's an academic, scholarly approach to to the problem. So I'm not necessarily a proponent or an advocate of using AI tools. There are lots of critiques we can make. So my PhD is in rhetoric and technical communication, so it's very interdisciplinary. I studied classical rhetoric, your Aristotle and Plato and Gorgias and the Romans, and I studied modern American rhetoric, the philosophy of technology, digital media theory. The specialization of my PhD was digital media theory, and I published a book on digital writing, um, and a newer book on disinformation and the history of rhetoric. So my training is very interdisciplinary. I studied under some of the top technical writing scholars in the country at Michigan Tech. It's one of the oldest PhD programs in technical writing and technical communication. So very very grounded, and if you took my other classes with me, you've probably heard me talk about Plato's critique of writing as a technology. There's a deep human history to critiquing technology that I've been very tapped into. My interest, in AI came up a few years ago. There was a study out of the University of Toronto where researchers in an English department had used GPT-2, which was a precursor to the public ChatGPT model. They'd used GPT-2 to write Shakespearean sonnets, and then they had a group of readers, and they asked the readers to try to identify whether the poem they were reading was a genuine Shakespearean sonnet written by Shakespeare or whether they thought it was machine written. And the GPT-2 uh, chatbot text generated outputs passed human detection about 50% of the time. So about half the time, essentially, people couldn't tell the difference. Which, whenever I talk about that study, I'm always kind of amused because I don't know, like, what does that say about the study population's knowledge of Shakespeare versus how successful was the chat. The GPT-2, how successful was it actually at producing authentic sounding Shakespearean sonnets, or is there just not a lot of common knowledge about the structure of Shakespearean sonnets? Um, every scientific study should have its methodology scrutinized like that, and we should always ask questions about it. That was an interesting study. And then, being at Michigan Tech more than I was almost 15 years ago when I was started the PhD program, we were interested in AI. We were looking at some of the stuff that Google was doing, and there was always a lot of conversations about technology and writing going on. Um, so this is a new phenomenon. I mean, maybe in some sense, it's the newness is the publicly available, readily available, relatively user friendly models in image generation and text generation that you can access for free. Um, at any, some of the main competitors right now are the Google products, and then the OpenAI products, and Microsoft um, with Copilot, Google, Gemini, and the names change all the time. I mean, just a few months ago, Google rebranded their AI chatbot from Bard to Gemini. So by the time you watch this video, right, I try to make things as timeless as possible, but it's difficult to talk about the space, all the changes that are rapidly happening. But basically, your major tech companies are, and some smaller startups and some smaller firms. There are also we're in an experimental stage where you're seeing some interesting like AI video tools. You're seeing some mass adoption from the big software companies like Adobe. Adobe has integrated a lot of AI technologies into things like Photoshop. So there's a lot of, you're seeing not just the explosion of the viable, minimally viable chatbot text generators, but you're also seeing image generation, and you're seeing a lot of invisible behind the scenes kind of stuff with AI. So I run ads on YouTube sometimes, and I talked to one of their representatives, and they very happily told me they're using AI in their targeting, user targeting. So trying to identify which users are most likely to click on your video advertisement. That's machine learning assisted user targeting. And so you wouldn't know that as a general user of if you watch funny videos on YouTube or listen to music on YouTube, you wouldn't know that you're being targeted by very sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms. Um, they don't alert you to that. So I call that invisible AI. There's a lot of just you're probably in some ways have been impacted by artificial intelligence even if you don't know it yet at this point in your life. If you're in any way have a smartphone or a computer, and even if you don't, by secondary effects by someone who has. So these things are kind of like everywhere, right? And some of that's invisible, and then some of that's very visible, like the public explosion or rapid adoption and ubiquity of the chatbots, which most of them do text and image now. Um, the GPT 3.5 or 4 model does text and has image integrated, and then Google's Gemini has both text and image generators right in the same window, essentially, right in the same instance. You can ask Gemini to produce an image for you and then produce text all within the same instance, the same chat window. That's a relatively new development just in the last couple of months. Before, we were using separate programs to run these things, and even earlier we didn't even have really widespread public access to them. You had to use the API special tool and everything. So um, that is my kind of interest. Is I've just been following along, and um, you know, I was a beta tester for OpenAI for their GPT-3 API, so that was very interesting to be able to provide some feedback before the public launch of ChatGPT. Um, and then I've just been kind of staying tuned and writing some things and publishing some things about AI, and now wanting to bring the conversation to you and get you involved. And the conversation because so much is at stake, right? A lot of this is just happening right before our eyes, and we are actors in the world who can get involved in what's happening, in critiquing them, in using them, in the development, and all the things that are going on. I mean, like literally right now, there are active court cases that will determine some serious outcomes. You know, for example, a lot of writers have accused OpenAI of training their models on their copyrighted novels or copyrighted written works. So it's like there's still pending court cases about this. Like who's maybe by the time you watch this video, they'll have been decided. But in general, the the California courts tend to side with the big technology companies, and you have to stop and like wonder why. Follow the money maybe there, but who knows, right? I don't want to inject too much of my personal opinion on these cases. I haven't severely scrutinized the court cases yet, but they're very interesting. Okay, so my background: rhetoric and technology and writing and a critical perspective, and actually using these tools quite a bit, and then following the developments and wanting to get you involved in the conversation. And I think there's also, lastly, maybe I could talk about the career angle. Is when we talk to we being professors in the writing program here, when we talk to our graduates who are in industry, a lot of them are saying that AI has arrived in their workplace. And so maybe if you work in marketing, for example, a lot of marketers are using AI chatbots to draft copy, drafting web articles, drafting social media posts, because it's fast, right? It's the time saving element. So using AI may, or learning how to, getting somewhat acquainted with these tools may give you some competitive edge on in the workplace or when you're on the job market. Um, that's yet to be fully developed, I think. I think there was an initial kind of rush where I did see a lot of job postings looking for prompt engineers, people who know how to tweak the input very well to get desired outputs, and there's a lot of kind of articles about that floating around. I don't know. We'll probably want to look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data and some more reliable data to see whether they're, you know, it's hard to quantify at this point how much companies are using AI, and it's so fast moving. If you any company that uses Adobe products, which is like the majority of Fortune 500 companies, most companies use Adobe Photoshop or InDesign in some capacity. Dreamweaver for websites, they're using AI, right? But it's by the nature of using an Adobe product. So ubiquitous and career readiness, and that's all very important. Let's talk about use cases then. How have I used AI? I find personally, I in my writing itself, I haven't used it a lot other than experimentation. I think there's still an interesting kind of, the writer's writer, the real writerly writer who really cares about their craft. They might not want to be associated with artificial intelligence. If you look at literary agents on what they're looking for, a lot of literary agents they publicly have on their profile not accepting AI work. I mean, you can't blame them either, right? They're already inundated with submissions. Why would they want to read through a bunch of AI generated stuff on top of it? So I think in the writing community, there's like a stigma, there's a kind of distancing and a really heavy critique. So I've been really careful about that. I'm not generating AI stuff and publishing it. On the other hand, a lot of researchers are. They're using it for things like grant writing, NSF, NEH proposals. A lot of peer-reviewed scientific articles are, researchers are using, not in writing, but in the sciences especially, Nature did a study that showed something like up to 50% of the scientists, researchers that they polled had used ChatGPT to help them with their writing in some capacity. As you experiment with the tools, I think you'll see they're mostly more successful at that kind of professional, technical writing, you know, internal reports, formulaic kind of writing, that corporate organizational communication. The chatbots are quite good at that. Probably because that is a it's a it's a soulless type of writing to begin with in some sense, right? Um, Ask Gemini to write a short story in the style of Hemingway. Well, we have an assignment here where you'll be asked to emulate the voice of an author that you appreciate and can kind of see whether you think that's successful or not. Um, it seems quite removed to me that the level of sophistication is not there such that Gemini could accurately write prose that has the essence or the heart of Hemingway or Hunter S. Thompson, or pick and choose from your. Um, and yet it gets close. It's like an approximation, but then it's interesting to try to discern. It's not enough to say soul. It's lacking soul. It's like, what is it precisely in the diction, the syntax? I mean, that's an interesting kind of question. But there are many use cases, right? I've talked to writers who use AI to help them with their research. Generate a list of 10 books that are on the subject of X or Y. Could that assist you in some way in the research process? I've talked to some folks who use AI to help critique their work, right? So it's like input some text and then how would you rephrase and such and such? Maybe. I haven't done that personally, I like editing and revising my own work. Write a list of 10 possible titles for a paper on the subject of A, B, and C. If you're really stuck on that's presented often as using AI as an invention tool, as a generativity. If you're stuck on a problem, if you need to get a lot of ideas generated really quickly. That's why in the workplace, it's like you can imagine the scenario. It's Monday morning and you have to write 20 social media posts to schedule for the next couple weeks. That's a big task. Maybe that could really be rapidly, with if you don't need something that's truly, sincerely, authentically you, you can imagine that might speed up your day a little bit. Again, not advocating for doing that, just saying you can imagine the use case, right? You can imagine the use case. Um, the image generation I find to be more compelling. Personally, I find that the image generation is fairly sophisticated, has gotten better over the last couple years. It's still very much, I think all of these tools have an effective first order phenomenological kind of effect on humans, where if you ask, input prompt, you want it to generate a specific image, you look at the output and you kind of go, wow, that's impressive, that's interesting. Upon closer examination, you usually notice inconsistencies. Maybe a hand has 4 fingers instead of 5. Maybe there's a line, where I'll just give an example. I write some fantasy fiction in the vein of Redwall. So it's like anthropomorphic creatures. It's a mouse with a sword, right? And so I tried that. I said, playing around with cover art for a book. Generate an image of a mouse wearing a cape and a shield and a sword in the forest with, you want to be really detailed with your prompts, right? So with, green in the trees and some movement of leaves and in the style of, a children's book, painting, so on and so on, right? And at first glance, it's like, oh wow, that looks like you could use that on a book cover. But then you're like, wait, the mouse has 2 tails, and why is the sword's a little bit bent? I mean, does it really? So often the text and image output from AI tools has a really impressive kind of first order phenomenological, just the way we perceive it. What I mean by that, the phenomena itself, it kind of affects us quickly and it looks passable. But then, if upon scrutinization, upon analysis, something is off, something missing. That seems to be the experience at the moment. But then again, you have rapidly advancing technology, so we'll see about that. Well, I didn't want to go too long here. Um, this is Writing for 11, Writing and Artificial Intelligence. So we have a bunch of fun assignments and experiments where we're going to be digging into how these tools work, reflecting on them and critiquing them and analyzing the tools and thinking about how as writers would we use them, why would we use them, where would we use them, where in the writing process, pre-writing and research, yeah, maybe for idea generation, drafting for just getting some basic content produced, I don't know. Revision, could you ask an AI tool to help revise take a clunky sentence, and maybe editing. I don't know. That you really want to carefully edit your work, and you need to edit the output of the AI tools too. So maybe at that stage of the writing process, it's almost it's hard to imagine precisely. Although then you have tools like Grammarly, which actually are fine tuned to assist you with rewriting your sentences such that they are more grammatically correct or even have a particular musicality to them. um, Finally, proofreading, probably absolutely not at this stage. You all AI output has to be very carefully, I think, revised, edited, proofread for factual errors, for biases, for inconsistencies. um, but just thinking about where in the writing process these tools are going to come up and come in. And then we have a very nice textbook, uh, Broadview Press, Dr. Dobrin, um, I believe is director of composition or chair of Department of Writing at I shouldn't University of Florida or anyway, a long-standing scholar who's been working in the space of writing, rhetoric, technology, composition, and has done a good job, I think, at creating like a digestible guidebook that gives you an introduction to AI tools, text generation, and some of the problems that come up with it as well. So I'm happy to have you here. Um, I encourage you to bring an experimentation mindset, bring a critical mindset, bring a philosophical mindset, bring all your writerly experience and intuition and questioning, and let's see what's happening with these tools. Let's see what's happening with this technological space and think about um, acquainting ourselves with it a little better, if nothing else, so that we can be better critics of what it means to be a writer, what it means to write, and why we should or should not use these things. So, thanks everybody. Really happy to have you in the course and looking forward to a very interesting semester here.